Folks kind of trickle in as they wake up and get here. Thanks for coming out this morning. Got a kind of what I think is a fun topic, something that I enjoy quite a bit, and that's a program called CyberPatriot. My name is Jason Wood. I'm actually a penetration tester for a security company named Secure Ideas. My background is that of a systems administrator, so I spent a lot of time, beating up on servers, bouncing back and forth between Windows and Unix, and having a good time responding to outages and all that other fun stuff. And obviously, I'm involved in CyberPatriot. I work with a group of kids that, from the ages of probably 11 to 18. And it's kind of a fun experience. So one of the first things that I always get when you start talking about CyberPatriot, people are like, well, what the heck is a CyberPatriot? And why does it have cyber in it? What is that? And this was actually an exchange I had on Twitter earlier this month. Somebody was complaining about the use of cyber too much, or one of these endless debates about it. And I made a comment and said, yeah, I ought to make some heads explode when I do my talk later this month about CyberPatriot. And I got this response: what is that? Really what CyberPatriot is, it's an Air Force sponsored program that is designed to teach high school, middle school, and actually this year they've extended it down to elementary school. They've got a program for elementary school kids to teach them about computers and computer security. Now that the difficulty varies, the elementary school kids get a much lighter experience in security than the older kids. But the idea behind this is really to get kids interested in computers, computer security, and if not that, any kind of STEM education, and just get them interested and engaged. The kids that I'm working with right now have all kinds of different interests. Some of them are really into the idea of, they just love beating up on systems, and they're excited to have their hands on the keyboard at all times. We got a couple of kids that I would pretty much describe as animals in that regard. Setting up Linux servers, and then you turn around and they're setting up Active Directory domains for something or other, and getting the Linux servers or laptops to authenticate to that, and you walk in. That was just happened over the weekend from the last time we met until Tuesday, and you come in and you're like, when did this happen? What are you doing? Down to kids who they're just interested. One of my kids wants to be a video game programmer. That's his goal. And to him, just the opportunity to work with the team and the kids and stuff like that, and learn about computers in general, is what he's hoping to get out of it. So it's a lot of backgrounds there on what they're interested in. CyberPatriot got its start around 2009, was the first season. And they actually have this set up in a competition format. The idea is they give them broken systems that need to be secured, and it's kind of like a capture the flag for blue team, really, is the nearest analogy I could give it. And it started out with just high school kids, and it started out with a small pilot program with maybe 10 schools, and it's expanded out. We're now, I think this year is season 8 that we've started. They've got some other things that I haven't worked with yet, like the Air Force Association cyber camps, week-long type of experience that you can have over the summer. Sounds like something I would like to try out, but I haven't yet. And now this year, like I said, they've extended this down to elementary school kids. And the elementary school kids get more of an experience, like, hey, here's how we use computers, here's how we do this, here's how we stay out of trouble online, not be stupid, start talking to a new friend who may or may not be that friendly. So that's fairly new. They're really just the idea here is that the Air Force and the other companies that are sponsoring this look at and say, hey, we've got an issue that we need to get people interested so that we can fill this pipeline of jobs that we're going to need. So that's kind of their interest in CyberPatriot. So now, quick quiz. How many times did I have cyber on that previous slide? All right. Answer was 5 times. You're going to hear it a lot. In fact, I was joking around with Kevin Howard, one of the guys here, and he was complaining about his current job title, which includes cyber in it. And I said, well, come to my presentation, you're going to have your fill of cyber for a month. Why do we use cyber so much? Well, to be honest with you, it's just because it's federally sponsored, and they've decided that that's the term. And so, like it or not, if we're going to communicate with them, that's what it is. So like I said, there's a competition that's involved with this. And when we start out with each season, it's really kind of an interesting experience because we have some kids that are coming back from the previous year, and we've got some who, they know how to get on and play their video games. And getting them to understand, hey, here's how you use a computer system beyond just firing up whatever program you want to mess around with. Here's how you make it work. And when we hit our competitions, which we're actually coming up on our first one here in about 2 weeks, on the 14th, the teams get basically a download link. The coaches get a link to pull down some virtual machines. And on those virtual machines, like I said there before, they're configured terribly. They've got things running on them that are acting as backdoors. So you may see Netcat or a Perl script or whatever. They'll turn on things like Telnet and other nonsense. And the idea behind it, the premise behind it is, hey, guys, you have been hired to take care of this company's network. And you've walked in and they want to do stuff with security now. They're feeling like they got some problems or need to make some improvement. Go. And so they give you these machines, but they also give you some requirements around that to where, these people are authorized users, these people are not. Or actually, they just tell you who the authorized users are. You have to figure out who's not. What permissions should they have on the system? Do we have folks who have too much access to the system? And are there services that need to stay up throughout the competition? And to do that, they have what they call their score bot running on each system. And when they start up their VMs, they get prompted for their each team has a unique identifier. So they put in their hash. It connects back to the scoring server over the internet and checks in. And now every time that they make a change, this bot is sitting here watching for certain things and reacting to what they've done. So if they delete, for example, a user that shouldn't have been, they lose points. If they take down Apache on the Linux box because they set up a firewall rule to block it, and it was supposed to stay up because it was the company's web server, they lose points. If they turn off Telnet, and that wasn't supposed to be there because there's no remote access, they get points. Reconfigure policies, etc. And all this is automatically happening And they actually get some feedback on that. There's a web page that they access locally that is giving them their score as this happens. There's several different divisions inside of the full CyberPatriot competition. We've got our all-service division. That's aimed at JROTC, Civil Air Patrol kids, the groups that are focused on some kind of military experience. And then we have the open division. An open division is any school can or group, not even school, right? A group can get together, form a team, sign up, and participate without having to, join into some ROTC squadron or something like that. We go through multiple rounds. The way the season progresses is it's designed to kind of bring them along a learning curve. So we start out with a couple of virtual machines. I think the junior high school kids this year are going to get one virtual machine for their first round. And so they start working with that. The next round they have 3 virtual machines. And for the high school kids, they start adding in some questions around Cisco networking. And so we have to start teaching them how to, configure routers and switches and things like that. The next round, they boost it up a little bit more. They're always changing the operating system. So, this competition, you've got Windows 7 and Windows 8. And then the next one, you're dealing with Windows Vista and Server 2008. And then the next time, it's something else entirely different. Linux, we're typically, the Linux distribution stays pretty static. It's usually an Ubuntu system with some different requirements that it has. But by the third round, the high school kids are now using Packet Tracer, which is a simulator app that Cisco makes, to where you can drag in routers and stuff like that and connect to the console on each router and set up all the ports and set up the security controls in it, things like that. And then they have to save that file and upload that and submit it for grading later. So that's always interesting as you're watching the kids. They've been very focused on Windows and Linux because that's the vast majority of it, of their score. And then now we start adding in this networking, and so some of the kids really dive into that, and others are not very interested at all. They've added what they call a forensics component. I always hesitate when I use the term forensics in this case. But typically what's going on is they have some kind of question that they need to answer. So we were doing a practice round last night with the teams that I work with. I actually work with 4 teams. We got about 20 some kids that we're working with. And one of the questions was, and they always play these things up with the usernames. So the forensics question was, what's the name of the movie that Tony Stark downloaded? And they're on this Linux box, and so they're hunting around. Now there's a README file that says, by the way, this is a work machine. There's not supposed to be movies or music or any of this other stuff on these machines. So they've got to find that as well. And so they have to look at that forensics question, find out what the name of the file is, put it into a text file that the scorebot is checking, and if they get it right, then it checks in and says, yep, they answered that question correctly. The forensics component can be kind of fun, though, because like in the example of our, which turned out to be a Comic-Con video, the kids sometimes will skip checking the forensics questions first, and they're running through and they're doing stuff. Yeah, we'll get to those later. And they delete the Comic-Con video, let's say, and then finally they get around to checking the forensics text file, and they realize, oh crap, I don't know what the name of that was, and it's gone. What do I do? And it's like, well, guys, you take the hit. That's what you do. So it's kind of interesting in that regard, watching them try and figure out which order to do things in, and in the practice rounds we're trying to coach them along on what order makes sense. But you get into competition and that kind of goes out the window sometimes. And competitions, when we do them, are 6 hours long. And the way that works is they give us 3 days that you can compete during. So we've downloaded the virtual machines, we've got them set up on the systems, but we haven't fired them up yet. And once we can either start Friday afternoon or sometime on Sunday or Saturday in between, whatever. We typically meet Saturdays at about 9 o'clock in the morning. We fire up those virtual machines, we put our hash in it, and as soon as we put the hash in it, the clock starts ticking for the entire team. Whether we fire up 1 machine or 3 machines, you've got 6 hours from this starting point. And during the competition, of course the mentors and the coaches are all hands off. We have to sit here and just kind of spectate and watch and maybe help them out with some things where they have an underlying issue that occurs, maybe with one of their laptops that's running VMware or what have you. But that's really all we can do. And you'll sit there watching them the first couple of hours. And last year they started doing this. They're doing it again this year, where every time you get something right, you have the sound of Mario from Super Mario Brothers as he lands on the flagpole and finishes the level. And in the beginning of competition, that's all you hear is Mario, finishing a level. And after about an hour and a half, that tapers off, and then we have 2 hours of dead silence as far as that goes. And the kids start getting really frustrated, and so you get to watch how they handle the pressure at that point. And 6 hours sounds like a terribly long time, but we use it every single time up to the bell. So it's a little bit of a kick. Like I said, with the rounds, we start off with a couple of different rounds, and the way it works is this is for high school. Junior high school is a bit different. But for the high school students, they start off and they do 2 rounds. And so in this case, that's going to be beginning of November, beginning of December. And depending on how you did in those 2 rounds determines whether or not you qualify for 2 different tiers, silver tier and gold tier, I think it is. And gold tier is on track to compete for nationals. Silver is out for nationals, but they're continuing to compete against each other. They compete to see who's going to win state for their individual states. And then from there, they go on and start competing for region and seeing how they're doing that in that area. Again, as they do this, we're whittling down who's got their chances of making it to nationals. And by the time we're done, we have nationals in, I think, April this year. And CyberPatriot pays for the team and one of their coaches to fly out to Washington, D.C. for a weekend where they actually compete. And they have the 2 top Air Force JRTC teams, 2 top Marine, 2 top Army, Navy, and Civil Air Patrol in the, at least in all service division, is how they arrange that. And then they have the top teams from the open division come and compete as well. They don't compete against each other, but they're there doing it at the same time. Junior high school, they don't, you can see they're not. And that's something the kids really enjoy, because when they get them up there, they take them on tours and they're showing them stuff around DC, and Northrop Grumman is a big sponsor of them, so they're showing, giving them tours. They have their competition and there's dinner and all kinds of fun stuff for the kids there, and they get really excited about that. So you ever search for hacker on the internet? You see somebody sitting there with a hoodie, hammering away at it. This was actually from last year. During competition, I looked up to see how one of the teams were doing, and this is a 7th grader. Alex is sitting over here pounding away at the keyboard, slumped down, just hood up, and he's going at it. And this was later on in the competition, so he was kind of frustrated. The competitions, with the kids, the students, you just never know what you're going to see them do. One of the things that's really interesting each year is you find who are your alpha geeks in the kids who are interested in what's going on. And they're pushing, they're encouraging, they automatically become kind of a leader amongst all the other students because they know how to make this thing go. So every time you hear them yelling for him to come over and help them out with something or what have you, you have kids that really get interested in specific areas. So one of the students really liked the Cisco networking, and all of a sudden he focused on that my first year and just dove into it and did really well. We had others rather, who are really into Linux, and they actually freak out if you hand them a Windows VM, oddly enough. And I don't know what to do with this. Okay, this is different. I've got a 7th grader this year that I don't know what his parents are doing with him, but he's all over the keyboard, loves working on Linux, and he's got a lot to learn. But for a 7th grader, I mean, I'm really excited about seeing him progress and where he goes. And that's one of the really fun things about this program is you start out with a group of kids, and obviously we're going to lose some each year to graduation and other events, but you get to see a progression on what they're interested in and how they improve and how they grow up. One of my Prime Alpha geeks this year was a 9th grader last year, and you couldn't get him to sit still for 5 minutes. He was incredibly talented. He does really well. He's the one I was referring to that's bringing up Active Directory domains over the weekend, and then rebuilding systems and installing Linux on them and getting them set up to authenticate to the AD repository and stuff like that. But the first year, man, we could not. I mean, he would wander around the classroom the entire night that we were practicing. This year, he's settled down more and he's more focused. Next year, I expect he'll, be more so. So by the time he hits 11th and 12th grade, it should be interesting to see where he goes. So we have an interesting relationship between the coaches or mentors and the students, the competitors. Like I said, when we're in competition, we can't help them out. And it kills you sometimes because you're looking over their shoulder and you're like, oh, he was almost, I can't say anything, right? And it gets really hard sometimes to keep your mouth shut and keep your hands off the keyboard during competition. But during practice, we have a really pretty good time. They're a lot of fun to interact with. You never know what you're going to get asked. My first year involved with it, we had one of the students that he was always asking about the stuff he was downloading and games he was playing, and oh look, my computer's completely compromised, I need to reinstall because I downloaded this game over BitTorrent and who knows what I got on it, but I can't do that until I finish beating this game. And I said, no, you need to clean the system up and reformat, reinstall. No, not until I beat it. Okay. Just don't do that on any of our systems, okay? We get asked about how we break into different things. So the kids know that I do penetration testing, that my job is to hack systems. And so they'll start asking me questions about that. And it's like, well, yeah, let's not really talk about that too much. Some of the kids, we will. I walk a little bit of a line. Because as we're teaching them to defend against systems, you kind of have to explain what it is they're defending against. What's the problem with, let's say, not having an account lockout on your systems, or what's the problem? What's the attack against passwords? So you have to talk about how passwords get cracked, how they get attacked. At the same time, the Air Force and all the sponsors don't want us to teach them how to do that. They don't want us to fire up the tools and show them, oh, look, here's how you you go for this. So for me, at least, I have to be a little careful in what I say, because I get excited and start talking. Oh yeah, here's all you do to, look at this web app, and here's, oh wait, no, I can't show you that on a website. All right. But our job is really to just teach them the basics, and hopefully teach them to the point that they start teaching each other. As the kids get more experience, you find that the ones who are older and have done this for a while are now the ones you're turning to and saying, hey, I need you to go set up a practice image and get them started. I need you to walk through setting up an attack plan, and what we call an attack plan. Basically the checklist of things that they're going to run through approximately in what order and stuff like that. So they remember what they're doing and they don't miss steps. And so work with the other teams or the newer students and help them create their attack plan. So you really start depending on them. And you get a lot of fun feedback. I've had one of my students, he and I would talk. He knew a ton of stuff. By the time I met him, he was a senior already, but he knew a ton of stuff by the time I met him. And so he was asking me about stuff like, hey, how do I load up custom firmware on this Android device? And so we were going back and forth about that. And his big thing is he wanted to strip this thing down to the bare minimum, so you got the most system resources available to him on this tablet. So it really varies on how we interact with the kids, just depending on their interest. Now, we do have some resources available to us as part of the program. One of the things that we get is a bunch of prepared presentations by CyberPatriot. So if you were wanting to start out a team, which is kind of a daunting task in some ways, what do I need to cover? What do I need to, what do we need to do to prepare them to compete? Well, there's a bunch of presentations that they already have set up for us. Some of these presentations I will mock quite vocally while I'm teaching the kids, because they'll do things like, my favorite is probably the password slide, because they start out, this is a really bad password, 1234. It's like, well, yeah. All right, ABC 1234. Okay, it's a tiny bit better, but it's still horrible. And they get up to the point where, hey, we've got this nice long phrase, and then they remove everything and they make it into this nice password of 12 characters or whatever it is. And I start telling the kids, okay, see, this is what they're saying a strong password is. But if you use the sentence that was up above that, you're much better off, and it's easy to remember because it's got symbols all through it, and it was ripe to screw up. Some of the stuff they bring up, you look at and you go, well, that's nice from a NIST compliance perspective, but whatever. But at least that gets us going. Microsoft has actually set it up to where each of the teams get access to DreamSpark, which is kind of like MSDN Lite. So we have, I didn't do it, operating systems, applications, and stuff like that that we can set up for them to get them experience. And so what I've started doing, like with my team this year, Sorensen Media gave us a bunch of old servers, that an old server and some disk space that array that they had, they weren't using anymore. We loaded up Windows 2008 on it, enabled the Hyper-V role using our DreamSpark license, and now when I set up practice images, VMs, they like to use images for VMs in CyberPatriot. But so now instead of trying to copy these around to laptops using USB sticks, which takes a half an hour every time you do this, and then there's problems on some system, I bring these things up and say, okay, here's your SSH access, here's your access via remote desktop, go. And it's really easy for me to, here's one VM, let me create 4 copies of that, turn them all up, get them configured, and now the teams are off to the races in 10, 15 minutes. So it's pretty nice to have that kind of resources for us. Cisco has sets it up where everybody gets access to the Network Academy. So they have all of their training materials and stuff like that for like CCNA. Kind of, it's not completely that curriculum, but still a lot of information, and gets them to where they can at least set up routers and switches and maybe some firewalls and know how to plug them in and what they're doing. From there on, it's really whatever you can put together. So you have to just think about, okay, well, what are they getting, what's showing up in competition or on our practice images and stuff like that. Okay, let me make a practice VM and we'll turn them loose on that. Earlier this month, I gave the kids each year, one thing is that they always do it each round, there's some kind of backdoor into the systems. And which is really important to find, because when you go to nationals, they actually have a red team attacking the systems that you're trying to harden. And they're at least playing somewhat nice to the kids, to the high school kids and stuff like that. But you've got to get rid of these backdoors, or the red team is going to dive in and start messing with you and turning the firewall back off again, or rechanging policies on you, or who knows what. So I created a practice VM that had 3 different, what I called backdoors, that they needed to find, and that was all that was wrong with them. So I had Telnet running on it. All the kids found that really fast. I had set up basically Netcat to start at boot, and so that fired up and was running, and I think I stuck that on, it was just on some random high port, but at least then they could see the exe, nc.exe running. And then I actually set up the interpreter service for persistence on the system. So that was actually running under the services MMC on your Windows box. So it was a little bit harder to find, but then you mess around, do things like the port number is 31337. Something that looks, hopefully will catch their eye. But the exercise there was, hey, we struggle every year to find the back doors. Every competition. Here's a set of stuff where don't focus on anything else, because there's nothing else that matters. Just find the back doors. So that's just an example of how you can put things together and put together some practice scenarios. You can also use really whatever software tools you can find freely available. You can't use commercial tools, so going out and, I don't know, plugging it into your VM into Tripwire and throwing down a compliance standard onto it and stuff like that. Boom, it's configured and it's hardened. That's not allowed. Some of the forensic stuff that they ask, you can't use any commercial forensic tools or anything like that. It has to be free, something the other teams would have access to as well. But there is an issue with that, because when you go to nationals, if your team makes it up to nationals, you are very limited on what you can bring in. So if you get dependent on the idea of, hey, I've got my shell scripts set up and I've got some PowerShell scripts ready to go, and it's going to run through and just real quick just knock out a ton of stuff, and now I can focus on the last 10% of the stuff I'm trying to find. When you go to nationals, you can't do that. You can't take any electronic media into the room. So that thumb drive or DVD or that you had with all your scripts on it, that's out. So they have to know what they're doing with all this stuff. So they don't want them to get too dependent on that. Again, the goal is to educate. We have it wrapped into a competition framework, and everybody wants to win, but it's to learn new stuff. All right, so some things I usually get asked about this. One, people start asking me about the terminology. Why is it CyberPatriot? That's a very nationalistic kind of sentiment and name and the whole bit. And it's like, well, it's sponsored by the Air Force, so what do you expect, right? And nationally focused organization. Does it require you to put together a team under a JROTC group? No. You've got the open service division. Like I said, you could get 6 kids in your neighborhood who wanted to do this, and you can compete. That's fine. They just need a coach to sponsor them and go through the process and help them along. How heavy is the military focus in the program? Honestly, not very. Really, you don't see very much about it at all. I work with students down the road here on Riverdale Road at Utah Military Academy, which is a military-focused charter school, college prep school. So we have a lot of military focus, but that has to do with the school, not CyberPatriot. I have no military background at all, and so the kids will come in, and they come in late and they knock on the door, permission to enter, and it's like, get in here. I don't care about that. It's after school, guys. Come on. Do we teach them to hack? Like I said, no, we can't do that. That's actually part of what the Air Force tells us we have to agree to, is not teach them how to hack. Once the season's over, however, we will do things like MITRE has a capture the offensive focus, capture the flag for high school student. So we'll go do that during the summertime, but out of the CyberPatriot umbrella. Why don't we teach them to hack? Well, to be honest with you, because folks are afraid that we're going to, teach kids how to go run around and, compromise websites or systems or whatever, and they're going to go hog wild and have a good time. And there's a couple of them that, there might be something to that. A lot of enthusiasm, and they'll jump before they think. How much of my time is it going to take up? That depends. So when I got involved in CyberPatriot, a guy I was working with said, hey, if I'm working with a Civil Air Patrol Squadron, which I had never heard of before, that they have this program called CyberPatriot, and we teach them computer security, and it's kind of cool and stuff like that, and you ought to check it out if you're interested in volunteering for something. Now in his case, his team doesn't meet very much, or at least they don't pull him very much. So it doesn't take up a whole lot of his time. The team that I work with, the school's principal is very into this. He was at Clearfield High School as the ROTC instructor there, and Major Workman has had a couple of teams go to, got a hand back there, Major? What's that? Oh, okay. Yeah. So Clearfield High went to nationals several times, and they have won it. Not every time, but they've won nationals, and so he is very focused into that. So to be honest with you, I'm there Tuesday and Thursday nights for an hour and a half each time, and then you have the 6 hours during competitions, and so it can take up a lot of time. It can take up a lot of time while you're building images and stuff like that for them to practice on. But it's really kind of up to you. If you want to start a team, it's actually pretty straightforward. You go to uscyberpatriot.org, go through the registration process, and you don't need a ton of stuff. Each team is capped out at 6 members max. You can have 5 competing at any time, and then the 6th one is an alternate. And we found that's useful because typically by hour 4.5, somebody's brain has gone to mush, and they're useless, and they're getting frustrated, and they're starting to smash the keyboard. And so you pull them out, and or they will usually do it, pull themselves out, and the alternate sits in and takes over their spot for the remainder of the competition. It's also nice if somebody can't make it for some reason. So anyhow, you need a few students. You don't need to have I think the minimum is 2 students to a team. Our junior high school team several times competed last year with 2 kids, which did get awkward when they had 3 virtual machines to work with. But you can do it that way. You need a few laptops, and they need to have enough memory and horsepower to at least run a VM. So 4 gigs minimum, more is better. It's easy to find a system with more than 4 now. Some kind of reliable internet access. Now this can be a problem if you're working at a school. When we were at Clearfield High, our systems that we were using were not allowed on the school's network, and it didn't have access to for the score bot to check in. So that was a bit of a problem. That was something we had to deal with. Fortunately, AT&T actually sponsors CyberPatriot, and if a team asks for it, they will send out wireless cards, cellular wireless cards that you can use during competition for free. They do put the restrictions on it that this is only for, CyberPatriot. Don't be using it to watch movies or whatever. But it is a way to do it. You need some place to meet, preferably where there's less distractions than or as few distractions as possible, because we need to get their attention. Some of the stuff is dry. You start talking about here's how we can set up a firewall, and here's what the individual rules are, and this, that, and the other, and the kids are just like, okay, sure, let me go onto my phone and screw around for a bit. But we need some kind of place to meet to where they can get together and then practice and compete. And like I said, it's going to need time. But it's with time, in my opinion, well spent, because I have a blast working with them. So, like I said, Clearfield High School is actually where I started out working with CyberPatriot. I put it out there and said, hey, I'm looking to be a mentor. When I registered, I didn't have a team in mind. I didn't know anybody who was doing it out here. And I got very quickly hooked up with Clearfield High. And they already had an mentor there, which was great, because I had no idea what I was doing and how this program worked that first year. We had a group of about 10 kids, give or take. By the time we were done, about 7 who were active, who were competing. And as the year went along, we started out kind of slow. We did okay, and the next round was all right, a little bit better. The third round, the team really stepped it up, and they actually qualified for nationals. And so they flew to DC. So this picture here is actually from this Patriot Flickr page of the team competing. Now there's some cool experiences for them. How many people recognize the guy behind Nate? Yeah. Cole and Powell came around to look in on the competition and see how they were doing. Now there's a really funny story about this, because Nate's sitting here working away at the system. He doesn't know this guy is over his shoulder right now. He is focused on starting the competition. He had just sat down, and so he was pretty tunnel vision. And all of a sudden, General Powell from over his shoulder says, "So are you talking to the hackers?" Startles the heck out of Nate. Looks over his shoulder. "No, I'm just trying to log in." General Powell, all right, backs up and walks away from him, because he really rattled that kid's cage. And every time I see Nate, I like to pull that out and throw it at him from time to time and watch him turn red. Because he didn't know who it was until afterwards. Major Workman comes up and said, do you know who that was? No, that was the previous Secretary of State. Oh? But they get a lot of exposure, and it is a fairly high-profile program. You've got a former Secretary of State and a general coming in to check things out. Once the competition's over and they've done all their tours and stuff like that, they have their awards dinner. And so here's the team, just before the awards dinner, they're going through taking pictures of each team. Everybody's dressed up in their best. And lo and behold, Clearfield High won that national championship. And this is the team I was first working with. And so it was pretty cool to watch that happen. Now, I wasn't there. I had this thing called work that told me that I had to be on site at a client somewhere else, so I didn't get to go. Most of the kids now in this picture are graduated. The youngest of them, over the 2 on the right-hand side, are seniors this year. But it was a really good experience for them, and they really enjoyed it. One of the things that I found that works good if you set up a team is you want to find some student who's interested and engaged to be the leader. And that's typically going to be, everybody's going to gravitate to the kid with the most technical ability because they're just going to pull that direction. Hopefully, he's not only technically talented, he or she's not only technically talented, but mature enough to actually kind of run some things and hand out some assignments and try and keep things orderly. We were really fortunate in the team that won nationals because we had 2 seniors who were really good at that. One of the things that I have found this is difficult now working at UMA, working with a larger group of kids and junior high school kids, is balancing the different needs between junior high school and high school. The junior high school kids, they just have a shorter attention span. It's a lot harder for them to focus in. We've also found sometimes it is great to have less hardware and internet access available. The Clearfield team, when I was with them, we had some computers that had been scavenged together. I managed to raise some money to get a couple of 3 other laptops for them to use solely for CyberPatriot, and they were very focused when they were in the classroom. The next year, Utah Military Academy started. We had a number of computer systems, and we had to tell the kids very quickly, shut the screens, log out, get off of that thing, put your phone down, because it was just too distracting. So sometimes you have to work to try and keep them focused and not have them anybody consider doing something like this? Well, for some purely selfish reasons, it's nice to get away from work where you're dealing with projects that are due, reports that need to be written, stuff like that, and do something where everybody's really excited because you feed off of their energy. They're enthusiastic. This is all new to them, and it's amazing, and what you take for granted is an eye-opener. The other thing that I look at as to why I do this. Where did I start out? I started out not in high school, but I was at a point, obviously when I got going, that I didn't know very much. And I had folks who came along and helped me. And this is kind of my way of helping pay it back. To nod to those guys who brought me along. Now I'm helping these students go along. And you can really make a difference in some of these kids' lives. Couple of examples. Kincaid was my first year, was one of our captains. He is now at the University of Utah. He was a really good student. I don't want to take any credit for anything Kincaid accomplished. But he's an excellent student. He got in at the U. He got enough scholarships together that his college is paid for. And he didn't do that through an ROTC scholarship or anything like that, even though he was in the ROTC at the time. But he was able to use some of his experience to help him get those scholarships. He's done 2 internships at Northrop Grumman. One is a high school student. And when he finished his internship, the guys at Northrop Grumman said, man, that was pretty good. We put you on stuff and you didn't break anything. Which he thought was a pretty good backhanded compliment. And now he's working doing development while he's going through college as well. We have Shay from last year. He was our team captain last year, and one of the kids who won a couple years ago. He's now at Weber State, and he's been able to, in high school, was working in IT at a company as a part-time job. And that beats the heck out of flipping burgers. And he got his start and his experience in CyberPatriot, in working with the other students and bouncing ideas off of us. So, I mean, you really can make a difference in these kids' lives. We've got some that I'm seeing now that, have a bright future ahead of them, and I'm excited to see how they develop and grow. So, if you have any interest in doing something like this, this is a great program. Yes, there's some verbiage that we have to swallow. If you're adverse to using the word cyber, you have to deal with that. because it's there. But it's a great program, and it's a lot of fun. The competition is a blast. The enthusiasm is totally refreshing. You know, it helps me not get overloaded and bored. So if you have any interest in doing it, I'd highly recommend it. You have a good time, you'll influence some kids' lives, and like I said, you'll pay it back to those who helped you along in your career. So with that, are there any questions? Only got about a minute or two. No? Sir? So they do have an official curriculum where they start out, you know, hey, this is what security is, confidentiality, availability, integrity, and all that other good stuff, right? We start talking about Windows fundamentals. This is where you configure a firewall. This is where this is what a firewall does. Then we start getting into Linux basics. And then from there, after you get them kind of oriented in the operating system, it starts opening up to just general topics. Do we deviate from the curriculum? Yes, because it takes, at a certain point, one, the curriculum is boring. There are things that we need to cover, and they're just going to be boring, but it is boring. And two, you need to start adding on to it, you know, and getting them more information, and need to make it fun for them. And so we try and get them hands on the keyboard every week, as much as we can, so they're actually doing something and feeling like they're learning something. Other questions? It is not, but that is a reference. That is a source that I point the kids at. That's an excellent source out there as well. All right, we're pretty much out of time, and I want to get down here from here so the other presenters can get up here and get ready to go. If you have any questions, please come see me, or you can get me over Twitter or email address. Thanks a lot.